In this video, we're going to talk about whether or not we need heat mats and grow lights. It seems to be a really hotly debated topic on social media, with many people thinking that it is a complete and utter waste of time. So why might we want actually to have grow lights and heat mats? So first of all, we're looking at prolonging the season and having as many plants ready to go as soon as that season starts. So if you are somebody who grows year round, or maybe you're growing for self-sufficiency, then actually having these grow lights and heat mats is really going to help. We want our seedlings to be as healthy as possible and as strong as possible, ready to start battling the outdoor elements. Another reason might be that you're trying to avoid buying any seedlings from any garden centres or nurseries and trying to save a little bit of money like that. That maybe you don't have a greenhouse or a polytunnel in order to start seeds before your last frost date, and it just gives you an option to get a little bit more of a head start than you would otherwise. And then, of course, there are going to be our heat-loving plants that really do need a long seasons, like our chilies, our peppers, and our aubergines. And if you're growing more than one or two plants, then these can be really quite expensive to buy yourselves, or maybe you want to try different varieties, or you just want to enjoy the process of growing them yourselves. One time that you may find that you don't actually need grow lights is if you're not starting any seedlings till mid-February, when the light levels are starting to improve, and actually you have south-facing windows that provide you with plenty of light. If the seedlings aren't constantly stretching for light and growing very fast in order to find that light, then you may have enough light and don't need them and can still grow in the house perfectly fine. Another thing to think about if you are growing in a windowsill but you're finding that the lights aren't quite enough, then rather than a grow light, you might manage to get a box that you wrap around your window and you cover it with tin foil. And what this will do is it will reflect the light that is hitting the tin foil back to the other side of those plants on the other side of that windowsill. So they're then getting light from the front of the window and the back of the window. If, however, you don't have any south-facing windows, or maybe your house is just that little bit more cold and dark, an older house like ours, then those grow lights are really going to make a difference to how well those plants do. Another time that I use them is when we have a lot of pressure from things like flea beetles, or we have a heat wave when brassicas or lettuces aren't going to want to be germinating in that higher temperature, but it still allows me to have a succession of those plants in order to plant out when I'm ready to do so. If you are looking at going out and buying heat mats or grow lights, then there are a few things that I would suggest that you look for. So first of all, with heat mats or propagators, then any that are cheap are usually absolutely fine. So you don't need a dial usually to control the temperature. We just want that consistent heat. Trying the top of your fridge or fridge freezer first, or if you have an airing cupboard, then they're usually perfectly sufficient. The only time that these may not be suitable is if the seed requires light in order to germinate, in which case it would do better underneath the grow lights and on a heat mat at the same time. For a radiator, we may often find that maybe the heat isn't on consistently enough in order to offer seeds that really need that higher germination rate, the consistent heat that they would require. Because a lot of our seedlings are going to be on the heat mat for a shorter amount of time, usually 1 or 2 heat mats or a propagator is absolutely plenty. As soon as those seeds have germinated, then at that point we're going to remove the humidity dome, and they're going to come off of that heat as well, and then your next lot of seeds can go on. One of the more modern types of propagators that we can find now are smaller versions of these. So it's sort of like a third of one of these, and they're lots of very small trays that sit along the windowsill. And these, I would say, would be a really good purchase because we can have a smaller amount of seeds sown in each one. Each of the type of seeds that we plant are going to have their own needs. So if we have one massive propagator, then what we're going to do is have trays where some are going to need pricking out or moving, and some are still not going to have germinated. So by having smaller trays that have their own dome lids that we can remove, that's going to give us much more flexibility in our growing space. For grow lights, we're looking for a full spectrum grow light. We have the types usually that are on like a flexible stem that can be moved up and down. They usually have like a clip or something that clips onto your work surface so you can move them. These are usually a little bit less effective than some of the bigger ones out there. But if you are growing these seeds next to a windowsill, then that additional light from those is probably absolutely adequate. The other thing you'd need to know about these is usually they want to be around an inch or two above the plant growth, so the leaves, not a 12-inch or 8 inches above. That's not going to give them enough light. And then we are looking at some more powerful grow lights. And I have both of these two different types, but the more powerful grow lights are usually in a block or they'll be in a long strip. And these ones, usually you have a dial that can control how high this amount of light goes up to, and the instructions will tell you what's suitable for the different types of plants that you're growing. And then they'll also be around 8 or 12 inches above the plant growth. So one of the things that we need to consider with these is whether or not, as our plants grow, do we need to move the light away? So in that case, we need to have like a pulley system for the light to go up and down. So this is a bit more of a more professional setup or a more complicated setup than the majority of people use. I use a set of each, and I use this more effective variety under the stairs where there's no window. So it provides enough light for my seedlings. And then I use the cheaper flexible grow lights in the windows when these plants are a little bit bigger, and it gives me that ability to adjust them as the plants are growing taller. One type, however, that I would avoid is the type that are sold often with very cheap trays inside and the lights within the dome. And the reason that I say this is because as soon as our seedlings germinate, we do have a little vent on the top, but this usually isn't enough and it can still cause damping off or issues with rotting. So we really need to remove the lid at this point. So if our lights are in the lid, then we don't have any option then for the light to continue. And also this gives you a very restricted height of how much growth you can have. And for the majority of our plants, they're going to be touching the roof very quickly, and that's not going to keep them healthy either.